not having a microphone that works. I could probably do it. I may be able to talk outside the area. I do want to say I'm happy to be here and to see your mouths. Okay. Somebody mentioned hadn't used lipstick in a long time. I had to look for mine. Boot cut, so they sort of look like slacks. But they are so comfortable, and I am not going back. You know, the world can adopt. You know, there's some things that were good out of this thing. So I've become a permanent aficionado of yoga pants. Okay, so I used to work in the space program. Some of you may have seen some things with me in it because I had the unusual distinction of being the first woman in an operational support role in mission control during the Apollo program. I was a return to Earth specialist. I brought the astronauts home. Monstrous team effort. Even working in the program, you still cannot conceptualize how monstrous the reach of that program was. Truly. People think of NASA. I did not work for NASA. They think I worked at NASA. I worked at NASA some, but I did not work for NASA. Most of the people who worked on the space program never worked for NASA. Okay? They worked for Lockheed Martin, for Thicol, for PRW, which is where I worked, for Boeing, for North American, for Draper Labs, for, and on and on and on. Around the world working on the space program. Because communication, they had to have communication, they had to have satellite, you know, data coming in, and the world spins, okay? So we're not always facing the moon, okay? So there's a whole web of acquisition stations around the world, including Australia, okay? Madrid, all over the world, okay? So it's a huge program, and nobody did it alone. When I was in college, and I know from most of you, looking around the room and talking with some of you, many of you have had many of the same experiences I've had coming of age in the 60s era. I graduated from college in 1964. At that time, it was the University of Texas. There was no at Austin. Of course, it was at Austin. It was the University of Texas. And at that time, when women went to college, the expectation was that they were really there to get an MRS degree. For a backup, okay? Yeah. For a backup, in case he runs off with a trombone player or something. Or gets run over by a bus. But you're really there to find a earner with a good degree, okay? And your degree is a backup. And the expectation for women at the time was that if you were a college graduate, you might be a nurse, or a teacher, or an executive secretary. That was basically it. I guess I didn't really get the message, okay? Because I didn't do those things. I majored in math, and I guess my general expectation was I was going to be a math teacher because that was acceptable, okay? Women could be math teachers. You couldn't be the principal of the school, but you could be a math teacher. And when I got out, I ended up getting a job, came to Houston, and I went out on a job interview at TRW Systems, which was an aerospace contractor. And that journey began what I would call a total immersion program in learning about sex discrimination. Looked in the newspaper for your job hunts, they had help wanted women and they had help wanted men. Yep. Complete sex role stereotyping in the jobs. And it was still basically legal. The 1964 Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. And it didn't go into effect until later in the year, and even then, you know, they had to create rules and they had to create regulations and so forth and so on. And nobody knew what to do, and they had added sex discrimination to the bill only because of a few handful of uppity women in the legislature. Okay? And that it was thought to be a joke. Okay, and actually some of the male legislators supported it because they thought it would kill the bill. They really, you know, because they wanted to kill it for racial discrimination purposes. But somehow or another it passed and the women took it seriously. Okay, they would do those things. So that's when I entered the workforce, was in the wake of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The job interview I had was for a Computress. A gendered computer, okay? And this was a woman's job. Hidden figures, that's what those women were called as well. Apparently, I did not know any of the history of this at the time, and I was sort of baffled by the whole idea of Computress itself. But what the heck, it was a job. But the term goes back at least into World War II, and maybe even further back than that, of using women who have mathematical ability to do calculations. A lot of code breaking was done by women, for example. That too is an area where Computtresses were used. Anyway, I was hired as a Computress, and nobody at that time had women's studies programs. I knew nothing about sex discrimination. I knew nothing about the law. I knew nothing about much of anything. But I had a quick learning experience on the job. So, and then this thing about wage hour laws. We had wage hour laws in all the states. They varied a little bit. They were state laws. They varied a little bit here and there. But in Texas, the law was called a 954 law. And that referred to the hours. If you were a woman who was an hourly worker, they would say you weren't supposed to work. I would say you weren't supposed to get paid, okay? More than 9 hours a day, or a total of 54 hours a week. Now you understand, a working woman could have 3 jobs and work a lot more hours than 9 a day, and many women did. Work a lot more hours than 54 hours a week. But if you, with regard to a single employer, you couldn't get paid for more than 9 hours a day, 54 hours a week. We work Saturdays, we work Sundays, we work 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. We just work any old time, okay? That's what the team did. And then I discover these other people all get paid. And I don't. They would tell me, it's not, you know, they would tell me, my supervisor would tell me, Poppy, you know, you need to go home because we can't pay you past the way the law works. That's how I discovered about this law. And 60 or 70 hours a week because I'm a woman. That's the only reason. I would stay anyway, because one of the things that occurred to me pretty early on being out there, I would say within the first 3 months I was out there, it dawned on me, looking around at these guys I was working with, who were making a lot more money than I was. They were non-hourly workers, but they were called members of the technical staff. And looking around the room and dealing with those guys, it occurred to me one day, I'm as smart as these guys are, but they're making a lot more money than I am. And I decided I wanted to be a member of the technical staff and make the kind of money those guys were making, because I was working as hard as they were and I was as smart as they were. So why not? And so in thinking about this in this wage hour law, I'm going to work the way the guys work on this team. And if there's anything that I've ever done that was brilliant, that was it. Because I understood that the real horror of that wage hour law wasn't not getting the overtime. That's just an immediate negative consequence. The real terror of it for women, in terms of what it did, was that it keeps you from getting promoted. If a crunch comes, you have to leave. They're always going to want the guy. If a promotion comes up, they're always going to want the guy, because they can count on him to be there if they need somebody to work 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week or 7 days a week or whatever. That was the real horror of that wage hour law. And my most brilliant thing was to say, so you don't pay me, I'm here, I'm working the same way the guys on the team are working. And the difference that made was that the guys on the team thought I was a member of the team. I wasn't somebody who left at 6 o'clock. And they became advocates for me to be promoted. They were horrified when they found out I was not being paid fairly. And in fact, I mean, that's really part of how it was that I got promoted and made a member of the technical staff. But that journey in and of itself, you see, brought up another clue about how sex discrimination works. One of the women here at my table was talking about the same thing, and still, I mean, going on now, currently. This is still happening. The wage hour laws have been changed, okay? But my operations manager told me 6 months after I'd been there, we want to promote you to be a member of the technical staff. My crazy idea was working, right? 6 months in, I had managed to do this. He said, you know, at your 1 year anniversary. Okay, I'm patient. 1 year comes, and I'm not getting my promotion, and I'm not understanding what's going on. Because Charlie was a straight shooter. If he said he was going to do it, he was going to do it. That was our operations manager. And then a couple of months go by, and finally he calls me in and tells me about my promotion. And I discover a whole new thing. The whole upper structure of the corporation to get me promoted, because the pay differential was so great between where I was and where I should be. And even then, he said, I gave up, okay? I couldn't get you where you were supposed to be. I fought for 2-3 months, okay? And, you know, all I was able to get was I was finally able to get you into the bottom of that pay bracket. He thinks I should be higher in the pay bracket, but I was getting a 60% raise, okay? They had no mechanism to deal with past discrimination. And one One of the women over here was talking about the same exact thing, okay? That is still an ongoing problem. That if you are underpaid to start with, most companies today still have no mechanism really to get you there, okay? And that's one of the reasons why women, y'all going out and talking to women, young women especially, need to emphasize to them that they need to really work hard at getting paid what they're supposed to be paid at the beginning. I heard women say, oh no, you know, I don't want to make an issue of that. I just want to get in the door. No, you need to get paid right from day one, because you will suffer from it the rest of your working career. You will never catch up. I had a very progressive boss, the fact that they promoted me at all. If I had worked at NASA, none of this would have happened. I was working for a very progressive company, a contractor. I had to give up, okay? He said it would have been easier to have fired you and rehired you. He said, I could have done that, you know? I could have hired you in wherever. I just could not promote you and give you that kind of raise. So he said, so I'm going to give you the max increase that we can give every review period and give you as many review periods as I can give, okay? So I had someone who was fighting for me. Most women do not, and that's why I was extremely lucky. When I went over to the control center, I was not expecting ever to work in the control center. It was because they accelerated the launch of Apollo 8. They needed the people that developed the Return to Earth program to come over and help the flight controllers understand what this data was that they were getting. Because coming back to the Earth from Earth orbit is not at all like coming back to the Earth from a lunar orbit. It's a very different kind of thing. And over there, I got to have the experience of being the only woman in the room. I was pretty used to that by then, okay? I was the only woman who was a member of the technical staff at TRW for several years. They did eventually, there were some more eventually hired. About, look at channel, whatever, 54, whatever. Look at channel whatever, because we have all these screens and you can call up channels and you can call up audio, different things. And I would occasionally hear somebody comment about that channel. And finally one day I went, I wonder what's on channel 54. So I turned it on and it was me. Just me. Because they have closed circuit cameras in all those rooms. It was just me. I think today that would be called workplace hostile work. I'm here, I'm a woman, get used to it, okay? And they did, you know. I didn't complain to anybody about it. I didn't say a word to anybody about it, in fact. And, you know, I was a giraffe in the room. That's really what that was. And, yeah, somebody, you know, some of them may have been leering, but some of them were probably just looking because I was an odd appearance, okay? And see, I guess they thought that women couldn't do that job, but there I was. And they did get used to it. And today, there are a lot of women out at NASA and with the contractors who are working in mission control. In fact, we've had flight, not just people working there, but flight directors actually of some of these missions. And sex discrimination. They should not be staffing those missions based on your gender. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, probably if they were putting the best people on, it would be an all-woman mission. Okay? I mean, we now have plenty of women astronauts, and there's no reason that they should be limiting it to the first woman, okay? Why not have the whole crew be women? But the truth of the matter is that, you know, they really should be staffing it based on who's best, not on the gender. So last year, I mean, you know, for the last 4 years, Pence was always going around talking about first woman and next male